We're going to play a couple of different steps here that are going to be purely positional transitions, and we'll have some fun with it after that. So I'm going to do the exact same thing that we just did. Still flattening my opponent out, still hooking. Like I said, I could be wrapping, or I could just be cupping and pinching. Right now, since I'm not actually going for the submission, it doesn't really matter. Kick, pinch, and something Coach Jamie mentioned that I should clarify. I'm not sitting back away from my opponent. It doesn't give me great control over my opponent's leg anyway. It's going to feel awkward for him, it's going to feel awkward for me. Make sure that when you do this, I'm trying to keep my hips snug. I'm sitting into my opponent, which is why that my left ankle and my left shin wedge underneath his hip, kind of prying him off the ground that little bit. I'm still in a nice, comfortable seated position here. Then if I decide that I want to fall back, I can do that because I choose to, not because I was falling back here. I can't really sit up, and that's where you probably are going to lose the position like we were talking about at the beginning. If I'm nice and balanced here, I've got my heel in the way. Anytime I decide I want to bail out, I've still got the option to do that, which is why I'm not really giving up the same amount of control as I would in an armbar or another positional attack. So after I do that entry into my ashi here, still not attacking, all I want to do, guys, is take my, in this case, left arm and find his right leg. You can wrap it, but you'll probably find this easier if you just grab his ankle. Now, my hand versus his leg, no, that's not very strong. So what I'm going to do is, as soon as I get both of his legs controlled, I'm going to turn my hips slightly, so I'm a little bit heavier on my right hip, not my left hip. Now I'm going to take my left foot out from behind his butt, my shin goes to his hamstring, then up to his knee. Which means now, as I extend my left hip slightly and pull slightly with my left hand, sliding down to his ankle, I've got pretty decent control over his leg. And because I've got both of his legs controlled, even though I'm in a transitional position between two controls right now, he's not really going anywhere very easily. Does that make sense? Sure. So, here, here, here. Pull and push. Pull with my hand, push with my leg. Now I'm going to lift. My right heel that's pulling his hip down is going to come up, and now I'm going to weave it behind my leg. If you prefer, you can go to your ankle or to your knee. Some people just do it one-legged. There's a bunch of different variations, but the triangle is the most common. And this puts us in 411, so called because his legs kind of make an 11 shape and my legs kind of make a 4 shape. Of all the leg attack positions, this is one of the strongest. This is why I like to play with this early, because it's a really good way to attack your opponent while keeping your legs almost impossible for him to attack back. Does that make sense? Yep. So, from step 1, flatten my opponent out, hook, kick, sit in and pinch. Still just clamping on his leg or wrapping, whichever one I prefer. Find the ankle. I usually go from the knee down. If I just try to grab it, he can kick it free and kind of get away from me. But if I find higher on his leg, I can just kind of follow it along until I get a good grip. Turn my hip a little bit so that I'm light on this leg. Hamstring, knee, lift, and pass. Once we get to here, you can keep control of this right now if you want to, but I don't really have to. Comments, questions? Cool. Enter into the ashi, switch to the 411.
Maybe why some of you guys are missing it, but on the entry, you're doing good getting all to here. Okay, once I have his leg up, it's hard for him to sit up if his leg's in the air, right? That's one of the reasons we want to pick it up. So once we get to here, some of you guys are going, okay, watch. Right? Or maybe like your arm's kind of here, or it's like awkward, right? You don't know what to do. It's like an awkward picture and you don't know what to do with your hands. Right? So just have your hands here. And remember, Caleb said check it, right? Like you're bringing it here because why? That helps me pull forward. So I'm using this to help get me close and tight.
You guys see how my hips are almost coming up off of the ground? That's how you know he did it really tight.
So there's no space, right? Like there's nothing. If I don't do that, it's easier for me to come here and just kind of like, now lots of space. Okay, no good. So make sure when you're here, like, hang on to the person. Like, I use his leg as a mini fire pole, and I want to hug it. So when I fall, it's all on him. Any questions on that? Pretty straightforward. Just hug your opponent. Love him. Or her.
Or her. Comments, questions, guys? So far what we've worked on?
No, sir. No, sir.
All right. So building off of that. I talked to a few of you guys, but I want to make sure that I repeat it. After I get into that entry and we make that transition, I know we mentioned this kind of briefly, but it needs to be emphasized because if I stay with my weight on the wrong side of my hip, in this case on my left side towards my opponent's center of mass. This transition is going to be borderline impossible, especially if you got long legs, but even if you don't, it's going to be very hard to find a way to fit yourself into the position you're trying to get to. It's really important that you twist your hips a little bit to put your weight on the right hip more than on the left hip, so that I then have no problem taking my left leg out and lifting his leg enough that I can weave my leg underneath it, whether I'm doing the triangle, or sorry, the cross my legs and pinch version, or the triangle version, that I can then slide my leg underneath, and we wind up in our 50-50 position. So called because in a standard 50-50, we are both in the exact same position. This is technically called the 80-20 because I am in a better position than he is. I have one of his legs isolated. He doesn't have one of my legs isolated. A lot of people triangle here. I actually would recommend that you not triangle, because if you're going against a good leg lock guy, triangling still leaves one leg very vulnerable. It's not really a great idea. I would recommend that you cross your ankles, pinch your knees, and hide your feet underneath your opponent's ribs as best you're able. I don't like 50-50 as much as the other two positions because it does give your opponent more chances to attack, but it's still good to know because you'll wind up here in transitions periodically. Like I said, that's the last of the three we're going to play with before we start having some fun with it. So again, same entry into our ashi that we've been playing with. Turn my hips, switch to our 411. Now I come right back to where I was a second ago, and now I slide underneath to my 80-20 on the outside. Does that make sense where we're winding up on that? Comments, questions?
Can I see that one more time?
Yes, sir. Same entry into the 411 that we've been doing. Right to here. Now I'm going to come back, so my right leg comes out, hip, and then underneath and pinch. Now we're back to 411 again. Now we're going to go from the 411 to the 50-50. So I'm still monitoring his leg just to make sure he doesn't get away from me. Pick my right heel up just a little bit, so I'm still holding him down. I'm just up on his ribs more than his hip, so that my left leg can slide underneath, cross my ankles, pinch my knees, and hide my feet underneath his body. Make sense?
Sure.
Three good positions to attack from. 411 is my favorite, but they're all good ones to play with. And as we practice these transition, it's going to help with your hip dexterity, which is a big piece of knowing how to attack. Cool?
Sure.
What do you think? People, if they have rudiments of leg lock defense, they start thinking about putting the boot on, which is a good, defense if the guy's trying to go for a straight ankle lock. It will not save you from anything that twists, at least not long term. But if I'm just sitting here, I'm like, even if I can get it at all, it's going to be really hard to finish. It's because his leg is straight. That's really the issue that I'm dealing with here. But because I have my entire body clamped on one of his legs, one leg of him isn't going to be stronger than my entire body, even if I'm dealing with a much larger opponent. So if I'm in that situation, I'm going to fall, in this case, away from the leg that I'm attacking, so to my left shoulder, and I'm now going to drive my hips forward. You guys see how I'm still hooked behind my opponent's butt, my heel is still in the hip, or if I was doing 411 or 50-50, similar anchor points or control points. But if he's straightening that leg out, I'm still having a hard time getting to it, I'm just going to pinch high on his leg and drive my hips in. Again, it's my whole body versus his hamstring. It's not even his leg, it's his hamstring. So it's a piece of his leg versus my whole body. I should very rarely have an issue winning that battle. Once I get to here, because I already pinched, I'm just going to keep that pinch. Remember how we talked about clamping on his toes just like before? And because I have such a sharp bend in my opponent's knee, that's already starting to hurt his knee a little bit, let alone when I get the hook here and extend. Like you guys see, that's even less of a rotation than we had before. I didn't even engage my hips hardly at all because that knee being bent so sharply and that control over his ankle being so tight, that's just not a good scenario at all for your opponent to be able to survive. So if I'm here, again, I got into my position, he's like, yeah, you're not getting to my leg. Well, I mean, yeah, if I do it that way, but this is not going to save him. As soon as I turn and drive my hips in and just slide, I'm not going to let go and grab because then, maybe I lose him completely. Let's keep that pinch that I was using to create the angle and slide up. So I'm right on the base of his toes and weave around his heel. Pinch, elbows to the hips, just like the one that we were doing before, and then get to there. So the exact same finish that we were doing before, whichever position you want to attack from, just have your opponent give you a little bit of difficulty trying to hide that foot and make sure that you're creating that angle. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Comments, questions? Cool. 1, 2, 3.